The transphobia I grew up around was all about the specter of the trap. A beautiful, hyper-feminine woman who flirts with a man. He takes her home only to realize she's not a real woman. Hilarity and or disgust and or violence ensues. Julia Serrano calls this the deceptive transsexual trope, and it was our culture's main story about trans people for decades. I think I first encountered it in the hit single Transphobic Techno. This trope spent a long time on the cultural back burner, peaking in the 90s, early 2000s. It wasn't the result of any concerted political effort against trans people, just a sign of where the public was at, where their attitudes were. We were alluring, but hollow and untrue. By the early 2010s, when I was in high school, it seemed like those attitudes were on their way out. In 2014, Time magazine suggested we'd reached the transgender tipping point, citing Laverne Cox's role on Orange is the New Black, among other things. This is the cultural climate that made it possible for me to figure out my own gender stuff. I felt this really strong, inexplicable kinship with Laverne Cox. Totally a guy, though. So I took a 7-hour bus trip to see her give a talk in Toronto. The mood in that auditorium was so hopeful. It still sucked being trans, but at the very least, there was this forward momentum, you know? We were increasingly understood, increasingly humanized, and following the expansion of gay rights in many countries, people talked about our struggle as the inevitable next step in progress. Oh, how naive we were. Instead of dying off, as some people predicted, transphobia has continued to evolve to survive our current cultural landscape by hitting as many of our current anxieties as possible. Around 2016, as a response to our growing visibility, the political right started foregrounding new stories about trans people. First, the predator invading your bathroom, and then the athlete cheating your daughter out of a trophy. These stories painted us as a threat to the general public, especially women, and in so doing, they laid the groundwork for what's come next. In the past couple years, the stories we tell about trans people have shifted faster than I ever saw coming, to become basically the opposite of what I grew up around. The current wave of transphobia instills revulsion from our physical bodies in the same way you might turn away from a dead bird or an open wound. The trap stereotype has all but vanished from the mainstream because, as cruel as it is, as degrading as it is, it also implies we can be beautiful. The past couple of years, I've been hearing certain arguments against transition more than ever. That it mutilates people and makes them undesirable. That it succeeds only in turning healthy people into lifelong medical patients. This way of speaking isn't new, to be clear, but it is becoming more normalized. I think it picked up in 2020 with the release of Abigail Shrier's book, Irreversible Damage, which really mainstreamed the idea that transition reduces the value of trans men's bodies. Ugh. The right increasingly describes transness as a transmissible illness and treats visible signs of transness, like body hair and surgery scars, as symptoms. There's been an emphasis on our actual skeletons, the spookiest body parts of all, with people relishing the moment archaeologists dig us up and find no trace of our genders, just bones. I can't help but notice a growing fixation on trans people being ugly, disfigured, and mortal. I've rarely heard it talked about, but I think it's fascinating. What's going on here? So describing your political enemies as physically inferior is nothing new. In our case, it accomplishes a few things. First of all, it discredits trans people's perspectives on what we need by painting us as these desperate people taken over by an urge to injure ourselves. Trans feminine people are depraved super spreaders, and trans masculine people are unwitting victims. Neither can be trusted to know what's best for them. Second, the sends a real urgency to the claim that something is going wrong, suggesting that if we don't push back now, we're putting young people in physical danger. It gives well-meaning liberals a reason to distance themselves from the cause. You notice how a few years ago, a lot of people were putting their pronouns in their bio and posting hashtag trans rights or human rights, and you don't really see as much of that nowadays? I think a lot of those people go with the flow, and they're not sure quite what to believe now that there's such a vocal backlash. Maybe they're starting to wonder, what if this whole trans thing really is a contagion? What if they're helping spread a plague of regret, of infertility, of irreversible damage? Damage. It's a funny word to use about a human being. I mean, damage is a word we usually reserve for objects, a car in a ditch or a phone that was dropped in water, things that exist to fill some specific purpose. That doesn't feel like the right word to use for human bodies. I can see why you describe like an organ as damaged, like kidney failure is real, I'm not denying that. But entire people, it doesn't make as much sense to me. What exactly is the purpose of a body? And how exactly does medical transition threaten that purpose? This kind of language hints at a belief in destiny, a belief that a person's body exists in the world to fill some pre-decided role. A lot of conservative ideas rest on some version of destiny. Without it, the meritocracy comes crumbling down. In the case of sex, there's this idea that male and female are these perfect categories that never change, never overlap, and naturally give a structure to society. Julia Serrano called this oppositional sexism, and it's the foundation of a lot of our gender roles. Our birth sex determines how we should look, how we should act, how we should live. I realize this is all pretty basic stuff, but stick with me, I'm going somewhere. A lot of institutions rely on there being two opposite sexes: medicine, sports, advertising, the nuclear family, and so on. It's convenient for them when a person fits into one of these two categories. When a person changes their gender or their sex, they stray from the path set out, and institutions don't know what to do with them. I notice people usually deploy the damage argument when our treatments make us harder to lump in with our birth sex. I'll use myself as an example here. When I was born, my body came with all these expectations that I would be athletic, which I'm not, unemotional, which I'm really not, and attracted to women. That one, to be fair, I nailed. These aren't the worst expectations a person can grow up with, obviously, but they're mine, so I feel qualified to talk about them. Obviously, I've strayed from this path pretty substantially. Here's me at age 3, the world's youngest lesbian. These days I've trained my voice, I've taken hormones, I've had surgery, and all these things have been described as deformative. I've gotten comments from people who seem genuinely disgusted with how I present. Usually they come from my voice, saying I'm straining it by talking in this register, when I don't have another register. I haven't for years. Weirdly, a few have mentioned my bone density, they're worried my bones might not be dense enough. I mean, I think they're fine. There are tons of others that I won't share because they suck, they bum me out. And all combined, they paint a pretty grotesque image of me, despite the fact that for a woman in her 20s, I think I look pretty average. Not trying to brag, I'm just I'm fine, you know? What they describe as damage, I see as pretty common for women. I actually look remarkably like my mom. People tell us this every time we're in a room together. To my knowledge, she's never been called damaged for looking this way. But I have, because my look is pretty unusual for a man. The thing is, this isn't about my body itself. It's about the categories breaking down. People see a problem with my body because they think it's inescapably a man's body, and yet I don't look like one. They have no way to assimilate me into their worldview, because to them, the only legitimate sexes are cis man and cis woman. They don't even really use the word cis, but you know what I mean. So they see me and they reach for really messed up kind of guy. But that says more about them than it does about me or my body. There's one context where this language of deformation and illness is used more than anywhere else. The most important gender roles around are mother and father. So predictably, trans people are usually called damaged when our treatments impact our fertility. The two most stigmatized trans surgeries are the vaginoplasty and the hysterectomy, both of which make a person infertile. In Abigail Shrier's book, the titular irreversible damage is not having a uterus anymore. And I can't help but wonder, what? Since when is it okay to talk about infertility this way? Because to me it seems mind-blowingly disrespectful and frankly pretty controlling. If someone's at the point in their transition where they're getting their uterus taken out, they've had a long time to mull it over and ultimately decided it's the right move for them. It's really no one's business but theirs. A person who can't have kids is only damaged if you think their body is a tool that exists to pump out babies. We don't always use our bodies how other people want us to, and that makes us hard to categorize. But being hard to categorize isn't inherently a bad thing. If anything, I think it's kind of exciting. It means an opportunity to plow forward, create new categories, or do away with them altogether. Calling a surged up trans body mutilation is like being in 1920 and calling cubism degenerate, or being in 1980 and saying punk music is just noise.
I guess you guys aren't ready for that yet. But your kids are gonna love it.
Totally independent of how I look or what I want, it's mutilation for me to have a vagina because I'm not meant to have one. It's mutilation for someone to get their uterus taken out because they are meant to have one. Meant by who? I mean, some of them will say by God, but there's no shortage of transphobic atheists or agnostics. Most of the time, they just gesture vaguely to nature and then look to nature for approval. The anti-trans movement scrutinizes our bodies really closely for evidence that transness just isn't meant to be. They talk about the side effects and health complications we occasionally deal with, almost as if they're cosmic justice. For example, there's this prominent gender-critical YouTuber whose videos highlight trans people's health issues with the aim of rousing pity or revulsion or both. She's remarkably dedicated to this mission, uploading as many as 5 videos per day, mocking people's surgery pictures, saying or heavily implying that transition causes organ damage, endometriosis, and infection. In a recent video, she says that all types of trans HRT cause cancer and insinuates that doctors have orchestrated a cover-up.
So I've been talking a lot this week on my blog about the cancer risk. In the Netherlands, back in 2019, they've known about this for a while. They did a nationwide cohort, looked at 2,200 trans women who were put on estrogen, and they found that it increased their rate of breast cancer by 46 times. They know what these drugs are doing. They know that it causes cancer. That's why they're so eager to do the gender-affirming hysterectomy, is they know that they're going to get cancer real quick.
I hope it goes without saying that this is bullshit. She's lying. The study she mentions actually concludes that trans women's cancer risk is much lower than cis women's, and it's only 46 times higher than cis men's. Our risk goes up on estrogen, not because estrogen is carcinogenic, but because it makes people grow tits. It's easier to get breast cancer when you have breasts, genius. The goal with this kind of content is to mount a case that transition care is unnatural and unhealthy, that it doesn't just carry risks of harm, as anyone will acknowledge, that it is harm all by itself.
I've been having a lot of issues with my body and health-wise, and I'm not sure why. I was told
because you've abused anabolic steroids for a decade, that's why.
She evokes these images of deformity and illness as physical proof that transsexuality isn't meant to exist. They're interpreted as our bodies resisting the medicine imposed onto them, as nature itself ruling against us, punishing us for our hubris. Look, I'll be the first to admit that transition isn't natural. I was very much not born this way. Medicine isn't natural. Our gender system isn't natural. These are human inventions that shape just about every living person. That's fine. Humanity's ability to produce new things is part of what makes us special. Something being man-made doesn't make it less valuable. Nour Abi-Nakhoul wrote a great article about this last year.
What do we even mean when we refer to something as natural? From the late 14th century onward, the term has been used to describe something that exists as a result of the forces of nature, in contrast to something that exists as a result of human or divine intervention. This tracks with the way we continue to use it in most contexts today. Think, for instance, of the organic or natural foods movement. In the 21st century, an era driven by hyper-accelerating technology and digitalization, incredible engineering feats and advancements in healthcare and medicine, do we still find value in this atavistic man versus nature framework, within which nature is good and man is sinful?
There's an interesting fusion of transphobia and ableism on display. This philosophy thinks less of people whose bodies don't look or work as expected, but it doesn't seek to help them necessarily. Instead, it takes a person's deformity or poor health as a deserved moral judgment from nature. It starts from a position that healthcare is bad and should be avoided whenever possible, because a person's natural body is the right body for them. That whether or not they want it, whether or not they can live with it, it's what they deserve. It should be mentioned that this kind of biological fatalism is rabidly anti-feminist and totally incompatible with even the most basic bodily autonomy. Applying it evenly would mean opposing everything from abortion to chemotherapy. Some conservatives do oppose these things on the grounds that fertility is natural and science isn't, but TERFs generally don't because, they're hypocrites. They're not opposed to all healthcare. They understand some people's needs as legitimate, just not ours. Like a lot of people, they understand gender-affirming care as frivolous, as humoring us by fixing problems that don't actually exist. Maybe this is why trans healthcare has been spun off into its own realm, totally separate from public health. There's healthcare, and then there's trans healthcare, which is to many eyes a much sketchier, less scientific world. To see this division in action, look no further than the United Kingdom, which has a pretty robust public health system that trans people just can't use to get hormones. Trans healthcare runs on a separate track through so-called gender identity clinics, whose waiting lists can be several orders of magnitude longer than regular doctors' offices. If you want to learn more, Abigail Thorner's put out a great video on this that just broke my frickin' brain.
Several years ago, I went to my GP, told her I'm trans, and asked to be referred to a gender identity clinic. The first thing she did was refuse. Not exactly off to a great start.
I really resent that trans people have been cordoned off into an entirely separate class of body. It's terrible for our health, and it also encourages people to fear us. The distance it creates makes people assume our experiences must be totally foreign to them. It encourages them to imagine the worst when they think about our bodies. The truth is, our bodies follow the same rules as everyone else's, and the treatments we get mostly aren't unique to us. Every hormone med I've ever taken is also prescribed to cis people. Actually, every hormone medication that exists is prescribed to cis people. Let me lay this out. It's time for the hormone lightning round. There's no way I use that, right? Like, surely I got a better take than that. It's time for the hormone lightning round. I think it's just not going to work. Progesterone is used in some birth control and in postmenopause hormone therapy. Estrogens are used for both those things and to treat certain cancers. Testosterone is prescribed for quote-unquote sexual dysfunction, which can mean basically anything. Finasteride is used to reduce body hair in women and treat enlarged prostates. Cyproterone acetate is used to treat prostate cancer, acne, and male pattern baldness. Spironolactone is used to lower blood pressure, treat heart failure, and a million other things. The puberty blocker Lupron, which is widely condemned by the anti-trans movement, is actually used in a shocking number of places, like treatments for breast cancer and endometriosis. It's also given to parrots and ferrets. Ah, look at those guys. It's not really related. I just figured you could use a break from all this. Check out their little paws, their little wiggly noodle bodies. Let's all take a deep breath. Okay, cis people don't take these meds for exactly the same reasons as trans people, but there's definitely some degree of overlap. When men use T blockers to treat baldness and women take estrogen to ease the effects of menopause, this is gender-affirming care, whether or not we want to call it that. And cis people can access gender-affirming care without a tenth of the stigma or gatekeeping trans people have to put up with. They're certainly never called mutilated or butchered for it. This is because, in most cases, the goal is to bring their bodies closer to the norm, not further from it, as trans people do. They aim to keep a person's body static as they age, as hormone levels tend to drop off and people's bodies increasingly betray masculine and feminine ideals. That's not necessarily a bad thing, to be clear. Sometimes it's medically necessary, but it is worth examining. Consider how our culture prizes youth and pathologizes old age. I say our culture to mean North American culture, but it's true for many, many cultures. We're expected to avoid signs of aging by any means necessary, especially those of us understood as women who were sold solutions to wrinkles and gray hair starting in like our 20s. Right now, the global HRT and anti-aging markets are rapidly expanding, and the growth is driven overwhelmingly by cis women entering menopause. It occurs to me that where cis people take HRT to reduce signs of aging, trans people take HRT to create new ones. For us, the effects of hormones are basically the effects of puberty. Estrogen brings breast tissue and mood changes. Testosterone brings body hair and deeper voices. In a world that fears aging, people don't understand why we would do it to ourselves on purpose. Especially because even hormone therapy has its limits and things can go wrong. Sometimes the changes aren't what we hoped. Sometimes they feel like a downgrade. This horrifies some people peering in at us. There's a video that went viral a month or two ago of someone named Casey Miller who's venting about losing their hair after a few years on testosterone.
Hey y'all, so I got out of my haircut because my hair was driving me nuts, and I shaved it because I'm tired of watching my hair thin out, and it's less distressing if I shave it. So when I talk about being too far gone, I don't really know what else to call it. This is what I mean. This is how deep my voice is. This is what I mean by hair loss. And it just keeps getting worse. It keeps thinning. It keeps receding backwards. And I'm not exactly sure that's coming back. Those are the main things when I talk about being androgenized to a point of no return.
Now, I don't want to minimize experiences like this. I have my own share of insecurities. There are parts of my own transition that didn't pan out. It sucks. I'm not going to talk about them here because hundreds of assholes would start mocking them in the comments, but these things are worth talking about. However, the way transphobes talk about the potential negatives of transition is extremely politically charged. I think this video blew up because Casey's transition created visible signs of aging, and there's nothing scarier than a woman aging. This isn't me calling Casey a woman, by the way. I don't know how they identify, but the video really plays into this fear.
I don't really see me personally being able to come back from what's happened so far, so I hope that's a little explanatory. This is what happens when you give a woman testosterone. This for 5 years. This is what happens, essentially.
When anti-trans activists talk about saving young women from our movement, there's an emphasis on young, on the supposed virtues of youth. Purity, innocence, fertility, hairlessness. They project their own fears of aging onto trans men, as if they're the people carrying the last glimmers of their own youth. Trans people are active participants in our own aging. It doesn't just happen to us the way it happens to a lot of people. We have to face the next few decades of our lives head on and consider how we want to move through them. By traditional standards, it's not always pretty because aging isn't always pretty. Faced with these signs, cis people talk about us like we're more frail than they are somehow. Like our lifestyle brings us closer to death. But it's all projection. We remind them they too are aging, and that scares them.
I don't want your pain. I don't want your menopause and decay and death. I don't need you, Mac.
You need me badly, because I'm your last contact with human reality. The only thing between you and the shrieking nothingness you live the rest of the day.
Trans people are a scapegoat in the classic biblical sense. We're cast into the outskirts to carry humanity's ugliness, barrenness, and impermanence, to unburden everyone else. This culture has built up an extensive mythology around transition, what it perverts, what it destroys, what future it dooms us to. But at the core, if we strip away all judgments, transition is just a body changing as it moves through time. Your body fat shifts, your genitals change, your hair gets thicker in some places and thinner in others. It's impossible to disentangle this from aging because they're basically the same thing. Getting older always changes us. As much as transition feels special to me, I think everyone can get it on some level. Very few of its changes are unique, and many are near universal. If a cis woman lives long enough, her hair will thin and break, her periods will stop, her voice may even get deeper. A cis man's muscles will shrink, his hair will recede, his hormone levels will drop. Can you imagine if we called anyone else damaged for going bald? When you see your uncle at dinner, do you tell him, it's such a shame what testosterone has done to your body? God, no. Or maybe you do, maybe he sucks, I won't judge. These things aren't always easy. But they don't carry any moral weight. They aren't afflictions or curses. They don't inherently devalue a person's body. They're just side effects of aging. My point is that trans people aren't some subspecies whose bodies follow different rules. For better and for worse, we're overwhelmingly the same as everyone else. So when people evoke these grotesque images to shame us, your beauty will fade, your hairline will recede, the people who dig up your skeleton won't care how you saw yourself. They're right, but not because we're trans. These things are true for all of us. People see us barreling through adulthood with conviction and assume we must be making a mistake, but we're all headed down the same path, no matter the walk.
What was once before you, an exciting, mysterious future, is now behind you. This is everyone's experience, every single one. The specifics hardly matter. Everyone is everyone.
I'm pretty troubled by the anti-trans movement arguing that our bodies are objectively inferior and that our outward imperfections are proof of internal imperfections. We have a word for this kind of speech. It's eugenics. I want to emphasize that this tactic isn't petty harassment. It's not trolling. It's an incitement to violence that should be setting off alarm bells. The American academic Gregory Stanton introduced a 10-stage model of how genocide happens. And going off that, the trans community is approaching the halfway point. First comes classification, then symbolization, then discrimination. These were all achieved before I was born. To me, they've been a fact of life. But describing the enemy as physically diseased and at risk of transmitting that disease to innocent people slots right into phase 4.
Dehumanization is when one group treats another group as second-class citizens. Members of a persecuted group may be compared with animals, parasites, insects, or diseases. When a group of people is thought of as less than human, it is easier for the group in control to murder them. At this stage, hate propaganda in print and on hate radios is used to make the victims seem like villains.
We're witnessing the reuse of one of the oldest tricks in the book, one that's been used to justify segregation, forced sterilization, mass killing, and I can't believe people are falling for it again. I want to say that nobody is safe from this dehumanizing rhetoric, because the transgender disease represents challenges we all eventually face. It'll come for its own proponents as soon as their bodies can't work or reproduce. They'll be next, and they'll feel ashamed of themselves. To fear trans bodies is to fear all bodies, the ways they age, break down, and inevitably betray us. And I get that, right? It's hard to confront your own frailty, the fact you may never become everything you'd hoped. We all make choices that follow us around forever, and knowing it's universal doesn't make it any easier. Each decision leaves us older than we've ever been, with no way to get back. Nothing can be changed. The past is still the past, the bridge to nowhere. Every regret boils down to this. We might find a little more peace if we quit moralizing and accept that bodies aren't about anything except keeping us alive. So short of dying, there's no real way for them to fail. Infertility is not a curse from above. Baldness is not damage. Surgical scars aren't nature resisting wickedness. There's just a few ways people can be. They're not good or bad. As a trans person, this would be a big relief because I don't think people actually have a problem with my body itself. Their problem is with what my body represents. Aging, losing your beauty, outliving your use, and dying without ever realizing your destiny. These are some of the most human fears around. It's ironic they're now being used to dehumanize us. The nice thing about being trans, and specifically transsexual, is I'm already living outside society's shit. My body doesn't fit neatly into either existing category. The things I've lived through have made traditional jobs exhausting, higher education impossible, and mainstream politics hilarious. It's obvious to me that I won't find a comfortable place in the system we've got right now. So I've had to explore other options. Maybe it's funny to say this is the nice thing about being trans, but I'm serious. I've had a chance to reframe what my body means in the interest of not hating myself. Knowing I'll never be woman enough for some people, I found some meaning outside the traditional avenues. I can have kids, but there's so many other ways to give life. I offer advice, I cook for my friends, I help people get hormones. Obviously, being trans isn't a prerequisite to any of this, but in my case, it was a much needed wake up call. I do tons of cool stuff with my body. Being locked out of those typical paths to meaning, like education and parenting, leaves room to experiment, to be deviant in so many more ways. We all know the conservative gender system is oppressive, but worse yet, it's boring. It's a culture of stagnancy that, by definition, has nothing new to say. The system thinks it'll always exist, passed down from one generation to the next, which makes it terrible at grappling with aging and mortality. It offers no comfort to the afflicted. Tell me, what culture has the gender binary produced recently? Tradwife memes? God-made girls? I mean, if you want to talk sterile, Jesus Christ. On the other hand, most trans people are acutely aware of our impermanence. From our position, there's no way to take the future for granted. Transness is not hereditary. Few of us have children. The next generation will only emerge if we make their lives possible. With that in mind, think for a second about the art trans people make. The poems, the movies, the music, the video games. I don't know how to describe them except vital. Every frame of a Jonni Phillips movie vibrates with anxious love. When I listen to Backxwash, I can feel my heart pounding out of my chest. And I mean, Sophie, what is there to say? What a privilege to have been alive at the same time. Death and decay hover over so much trans art. It's often distorted, gritty, arguably unpleasant, but that's kind of what we're dealing with right now. It offers good company. People talk about us like we're walking corpses, like we're physical dead ends, but this stuff makes me feel alive. It makes me excited for future generations to discover it and feel the same awe it gives me now. Far from dead ends, trans people are overflowing with so much life, we're constantly giving it away to each other. If this is what it means to be broken, I think more people should break.
Get back here and stay with the other finalists. Oh, well, you've got to expect losses.
In the summer of last year, having released a grand total of 3 video essays, I decided to quit my job and pursue YouTube as a full-time thing. I had a little bit of money saved up, so I gave myself until the end of 2021 to make the video thing work, to make it sustainable. And in that time, I made a lot of videos that I'm proud of, that I feel like I saw have some level of positive impact. But it wasn't until December of that year, when I signed with Nebula, that I knew that this was actually gonna work out. Nebula is the creator-owned streaming service that is the main reason I can do this. I can honestly say that without Nebula, I would be making maybe like 2 or 3 of these a year, but I would have to get a day job. They've made it possible for me and a lot of people like me to pursue our passions and talk about things we think should be talked about more. For example, I had to censor my last video like you won't believe to keep it from getting restricted on YouTube. But on Nebula, you can watch the video uncensored and ad-free as it's meant to be seen. At this point, Nebula is home to basically all my favorite creators. On there you've got Philosophy Tube, Lady Emily, Mia Mulder, Cat Black, also some people who are not transgender. We're running a holiday special right now, so if you sign up before January 24th, you can get a year of Nebula for less than $1 a month. The sign up page doesn't make it super clear, but if you use my link and you sign up for the cheapest annual plan on there, it does give you access to Nebula and our partner Curiosity Stream, the documentary streamer with thousands of excellent titles. In my professional opinion, it is a bonkers deal. So that's curiositystream.com/LilyAlexander to support the channel and get 42% off Curiosity Stream and Nebula. Thanks again to Curiosity Stream and Nebula for sponsoring this video. I also want to thank my Patreon supporters for helping make this video possible. Patrons get early access to all of my videos and really in-depth behind-the-scenes looks at my production process and things that are just turning around in my mind lately. I've basically been using it as like a blog or a newsletter, so if that sounds interesting to you, you can sign up for as little as $3 a month. Special thanks to the following patrons: Mary Wishart, Jane Malcolm, Emma Casley, Taylor Hardy, Scatterflower, Rosedale, Maddie Mamode, Linda Jewers, Sandy Smith, Cassie, Callan, Clara Griffin, Duck Rose Chilies, Escher, Aaron Laura, Guillaume, Square 44, Harmony, Jessie Earl, Olivia Grimes, Emily Martins, Kiki, Lillian, Catherine Ann McCloskey Ross, Alejandro Hernandez, Cannon, Dr. Haley Isabella Colley, Talia Parkinson, Scott, sometimes Lucy, Rose Juliet, Gwen Loffman, Rebecca Gale, Dan Lizotte, Wimble Imble, Erica Peterson, Claire Anderson McGilligot, Charlie H., Otherwise Lovely, Hannah Leichnitz, Fly Girl. Whew. Oh my god. Okay. Gonna keep going. Let's not cut. Blueberry Hill, Darla Butler, Non-Anonymous, Fox Oslander, Jasperi Wirtanen, Coralie, Henry Richutin, Mathilde, Celeste Blossom, Momo, Mid-Tier Art, Manuel Feynman, ZHL, Caitlin, Charlie B, Cherie Monjovi, The Recognition Scene, Joe Liss, Rhea Chappell, Transfemme Flim Flam, Megahertz, Joe Azar, Joel Durham, Tracy Runan and Tell, Summer D, Jesse Rayner Bloodgood, Kana Q, Detective Meow Meow, The Numeral One, Lee Sloth Pope, Quinn Osgood, Colin Coltrera, Ruby Landau Pincus, Samari Braley, Smaz Ruby, Gia Marina Katerina Santa Lucia, Sasha Karpachinsky, Izzy, Benjamin Stone, Quillworth, River, and finally Chloe Jane. Hey, so this year sucked, eh? This year was awful. See you in the next one.